Welcome to Across the Curve.
When you line up safety, leadership, and excellence, that opens the door for lots of guests. And I personally feel that, there can't be a more valiant effort in the world than to protect and save lives. We hope the time that you spend with us will help you to understand how the future of work is shifting and what we can expect the workplace to look like in the coming years. Our guest today is Elliott Masie. Our guest today is Michael Yaffe. Angel is the VP of Global Human Resources at AdCourt Incorporated. Don is an executive safety and risk management professional with 4 decades of experience. Chester has been called the Apostle of Appreciation by Canada's Globe and Mail. Derek is an Emmy award-winning writer, producer, director, and actor. We hope the time you spend with us will help you to understand how storytelling is a key to learning.
Boy, storytelling is a wonderful topic, and let's explore the story.
Welcome to Across the Curve with Craig Sexton. Sponsored by DSS Plus, transforming business results through the development of a safe, efficient, and capable workforce. DSS Plus, protect, transform, sustain. Your host today has over 3 decades of experience in the entertainment industry from Los Angeles to New York. He is an award-winning writer, producer, and director. He has been recognized for his extensive work around the affective approach and communicating from the heart. He brings his talents to bear at DSS Plus with breakthroughs in communication, employee engagement, and culture transformation. He is everybody's best friend and soon to be yours. Craig Sexton.
Welcome to Across the Curve podcast. I'm Craig Sexton, the Global Creative Director at DSS Plus, and we hope the time you spend with us will help you to understand how storytelling is a key to learning as we discuss this topic with our guest today. But before we do, I want to say hello to my producer extraordinaire. How are you, Jay Gates? Come on in.
Hey, Craig. How are you? Good to see you as always. Another fine day, another fine podcast episode with you.
I'm so excited about today's podcast. I mean, it's extraordinary. I mean, our audience isn't going to believe who we have today and how we got him, but I've been
really looking forward to it so much that I crammed my second cup of coffee in early just to get it out of the way so I could really pay attention.
Well, good for you.
And be on my A game because I need to be really wide awake. By the way, that's my dog, Bella. She says hi.
Yeah, well, that's good. I will, as much as I would like to talk about your dog today, I have like 2 pages of topics that I want to talk with our guest about. I'm not kidding. I've got so much. I'll never get it in this podcast, but we should probably just go ahead and get started. What do you say?
I'm super excited. And let's just do a quick reminder to everyone to hang out at the end of the show where we do our segment called The Cleanup, which is where, I do a little fact checking to make sure Craig was very accurate on everything that he mentioned out loud. And then we also, have some insights. We talk about the guest and how everything went. And it's a valuable piece of information at the end of the show. So make sure you hang out.
Yeah, I mean, let's just be honest. It's just you making sure that I stay on track and tell the truth, right? Because it's been said before that I will never let the truth get in the way of a good story, right? So
absolutely, which really plays into our guest today because he's such a great storyteller, but I'll leave that to you.
Amazing storyteller. And to that end, our guest today is Elliott Masie. Elliott Masie is a provocative, engaging, entertaining researcher, educator, analyst, and speaker focused on the changing world of the workplace, learning, and technology. Elliott is acknowledged as the first analyst to use the term e-learning and has advocated for the sane deployment of learning and collaboration technologies as a means of supporting the effectiveness and profitability of enterprises. He heads Masie Innovations in Saratoga Springs, New York, focused on how organizations can support learning and knowledge within the workforce. He leads the Learning Collaborative, a coalition of 75 global organizations cooperating on the evolution of learning strategies. Members include organizations like Amazon, Zoom, Bank of America, Subway, the Hartford, and many, many more. So without any further ado, welcome to the show, Elliott. We are delighted to have you on the podcast.
Well, thank you so much, Greg, and it's honored to be here. And boy, storytelling is a wonderful topic, and let's explore the story in our conversation.
We will. Hey, but before we get started, there's just a couple of things that I have to say, Elliott. Number one is I am so grateful for your time here today. I'm one of the people that actually know how busy you are, how many things you have going on. And just to be frank, I'm humbled that you agreed to and you carved out some time for us. I really do mean that. Thank you so much for being here.
My honor to join you. Absolutely.
Well, that's nice of you to say. And second, the last time that we saw each other, Elliott, was at a learning conference, your learning conference down in Orlando, Florida at Disney. An amazing conference. I've been to many of them. I think this is one that I was actually presenting at your conference. But of all the things that I walked away with, during one of your general sessions, something that has stayed with me so long is you did an interview with Cooper Anderson. Do you remember that?
Absolutely. And he is one of sort of my role models for how to be a good speaker, and but more importantly, how to be a good interviewer. And we had a ball up on stage in front of several thousand people.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was an unbelievable interview. I mean, it literally has stayed with me to this day because not only was it entertaining, was it informative, insightful, but you also revealed a side of Anderson on that stage that day that I don't think many of us saw, because we're so used to seeing him behind the console or behind a podium, while he's doing his broadcast. And wow, what a treat that was. Let's hope that I do as good a job with him, or that you did with him, as I can do with you today, if that makes sense, right? So that's going to be my bar.
Yeah, one takeaway from all of that is, many of us are in a situation when we're running a meeting or we're bringing in a guest or we're hiring a speaker. I've been doing it almost 50 years now, and I've actually learned that the best stories that you get from an expert are when you have a conversational interview. And I've done that with people like Anderson Cooper, Michelle Obama, Steve Wozniak, one of the inventors of Apple.
Sure.
And the reason the interview works is that the listener views the interviewer as their sort of support person or advocate, so that you engage that speaker, and 2,000 people are going, wow, I'm glad Elliott asked that question, or
yeah,
I would have never had the guts to ask that question. And I really believe there's a dynamic thing. It's why even in this very, very high-tech world that we all live in, in many ways, morning radio traffic shows where, there are two people who are having conversations, people tune to that because they like the sound of two voices.
Isn't that interesting? I mean, that's just an interesting topic right there. But so, Elliott, literally, I'm not kidding you. I have 2 pages of topics. We'll never cover them. I could talk to you for hours on end, but let's just start with my first one, because I think a lot of our listeners would just like to get some context about you, right? You have such a diverse background, and you've come on such a, I would say, an unusual journey. But how did you get started in this field of learning?
I got fired from a job. It's interesting. I'm often interviewed about who had the greatest impact on you. And, Assistant Commissioner of Education, Vivian Anderson, who I worked for when I was a young age of about 24, I think, 24, 25, she fired me. And I remember she called me into her office. She said, you're smart. You do great stuff, but you are really lousy as an employee. you should try to figure out how to start your own business, because you really don't make it as an employee. And I thought about it. And I said, well, what am I going to do? And she said, well, you want to become the leading world's expert on a topic that nobody cares about yet. And so literally I picked the infusion of learning and technology. And in 1975, tech wasn't the PC world, and we didn't really have the internet. And so I became a world's leading expert on a topic that nobody cared about. And then boom, along the way, things evolved, and I was able to, literally over 50 years, have a wonderful career. And just to jump ahead, like many people, I think I have attention deficit disorder, that I can't just do one thing.
Right.
So almost about 12, 14 years ago, my wife and I decided to become Broadway producers. And I am now a Tony nominated producer who's done 34 Broadway shows. And why? Well, that's the topic. What you do in learning, what you do as a teacher, what you do on the Broadway stage, they're all about storytelling and helping people be impacted by a story. And so
Right.
that's sort of the arc of my career. And I'm 72, and I think I'm about 50% through my career right now. So I'm real excited about it.
Well, isn't that great?
Yep.
I mean, that's the attitude that everybody should have. And we're going to get into that, because I want to talk to you a little bit about, your Broadway career and kind of how that's morphed into the piece, of storytelling and learning that you've embraced. Because, I mean, we share similar backgrounds, coming from the entertainment industry and bringing that into the learning environment. I don't think it was easy probably for either of us in the beginning, but it has really proved out over time to be the methodology that people learn the best over. So can you just speak to that for a second? Is why is storytelling so important in learning?
Well,
yeah.
I use an interesting term. It's not a research term. It's almost a biology term. I think storytelling is organic.
Right.
It's interesting. You'll see people who will prepare for 3 months to do a 20-minute speech they have to do. And maybe they'll do a good one, maybe not. But almost every week, they'll go to dinner or drinks or get together with 5 or 6 colleagues or friends. And without any prep, they tell great stories. There's no PowerPoint. And why is it? Because if I'm with another human being and we are sharing a moment, a curiosity, a confusion, a pain, an aspiration, a hobby, it's organic that as a human being, I want to connect with another person. I would actually argue that one of the few species-specific elements that we have as humans is the ability to communicate stories with other people and to learn from those stories. So I think it's organic. And we all, if we're honest, can relate to when we were young, some adult, maybe a relative, a neighbor, a teacher, a person from a religious organization, told us stories, and we sat on the floor and our eyes were mesmerized by it. Because once again, a good story on a good topic that relates to your curiosity, it's organic as a learning and as an experience moment.
Right. Hey, a good story on a bad topic will suck you in and draw you in to something that you may not have thought you had any interest in, but wrapped in a good story. And I think, Elliott, people forget so often, right, is that at the beginning of time, I mean, I'm talking about going back when man was first crafting and developing language, the way we transferred information was via story. And where did we forget that? Where did we start teaching out of books and PowerPoint presentations and forgetting that somewhere in our DNA really is embedded this methodology of transferring information via story? Where did we lose that? How did we go wrong?
I think we confused sharing knowledge with publishing. And so I think our format became publishing. And so, you go to organizations and you go, well, how are you teaching people how to be good salespeople or safety experts? Or like, oh, well, we've got a full curriculum. We've got a curriculum, and it's a manual and a PDF or an e-learning module or videos or the like. But the reality at the end of the day is the learner is only interested in what relates to her moment of curiosity, her moment of curiosity. And very often we publish agnostic or ignoring curiosity. And I'm even talking about moments, Craig, from great people, great, wonderful experts. And yet somehow, their story went on too long, or they got off on a sidebar that wasn't quite interesting. But so I think part of storytelling is that you are relating to its organic impact on other people, And so when I've spoken in front of groups as much as 100,000 people, I always pick the person who seems the most likely to be bored during my speech. And my organic relation, I want to light that person up. And I look at them and I use them as a barometer of engagement. And so I think curiosity is this enormous part of what makes storytelling so important, but it also is a skill that we as storytellers have to develop to target and be conscious and interact on the curiosity level with our listeners.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you just said something really interesting there. Is storytelling, like my grandfather was a great storyteller, right? And I'm sure I adopted that craft from him because just like you said, when I was a kid, we had a relative, I had a grandfather who told these amazing stories and I was drawn into them. And I'm sure it's been a big part of that, had a big part of forming my life. But is it a skill that can be learned, or is it innate in us? If storytelling is so important to learning, is it something we can teach others to do?
I think we can, although I do believe we are shaped by the best storytellers in our life. I always ask every celebrity I've had an opportunity to interview. I had Michelle Obama for her very first post-White House paid interview speech that I did. And one of my first questions was, okay, Michelle, how did you learn to be a good storyteller? And she talked about her uncle from the west side of Chicago who would tell stories. And she said he'd tell the same story often, but I love the rhythm, the music of his story, the intensity of his story. So I think the way we learn isn't by necessarily going to a class on storytelling. In many ways, we got to go back into our brain and relate to who were the storytellers that really had an impact on us. And I think if we understand that and we shape other things by it, it works. The problem is a lot of organizations want to come up with a business process for storytelling, or once again, it's a curriculum or it's a manual. But look, you and I probably both own an awful lot of technology, and we've never opened up the manual for it. Why?
Right.
Because we figured it out, or maybe we've gone online and found somebody who knows something or watched a little video from someone. So I think it's really important for us to try to recover the organic nature of it. And I actually think one of the takeaways from the pandemic, as we got more and more used to being in virtual events like you and I are doing right now, is we became more open to engage conversations. Way back when video conferencing started, I was on a board of a company back then, and if we had this video conference, we'd have had to have 4 tech rehearsals to get it to work, and then you would look like this, like all staticky. Yeah. Now we're more comfortable with how do we connect with another person and tell a story in a way that they relate to. And if it's 40 minutes, they're not going to be there at the end of 40 minutes. It's going to be much more organic.
Right. So, hey, there was something in your intro that I just really caught my attention, and I don't want to take us off the topic of storytelling, but there may be some. There may be something here, but it caught me when it said, and has advocated for the sane deployment of learning. So you've got to explain that to our audience, because I know many people are out there caught that and are going, wait a second. What's insane about our learning?
Well, what's sane about learning is we learn when we are curious. We learn when we have a need to know something. We often learn when something's not good. We have to fix something, whether it be our car or our
Right.
bodies or whatever. And the sanity is when we link how we learn to ourselves as a metric to see, did I get it? Do I understand it? Can I do it? And that's to me where it's sane. Now, where it becomes insane is when we make the assumption that the learner can be passive and learn.
Right.
Doesn't happen. My bet is 99% of the people on literally this episode learned how to walk, how to talk, how to go to the bathroom appropriately from parents who didn't use a PowerPoint, didn't use a script, but didn't believe that they could do it in 45 minutes and then the person would have that skill. It was experiential. So good, sane learning to me is where it's experiential and where we map to the learner to see that they actually get the skill and they have an opportunity to practice it, maybe even fail once or twice. And
Yeah.
I mean, I fell off my bike, I think 22 times before I got the balance right, but wow, I love riding my bike now.
Sure. I mean, that's a great point. Learning should be experiential. And so I want to lean into a little bit of your history because I just think it's very interesting that you are the guy, right? You were the guy that came up with the term e-learning. How did that come about?
I was in a meeting with some executives from IBM down in Georgia, and they at that point had started to use the term e-business, which came about after we got email. It was before e-commerce came out. And I literally sat with these senior executives and I said, we're starting to do more with learning. This is just as the internet was bubbling up. And I said, why don't we think about calling it e-learning? You can actually brand it that way. And probably foolishly for them, one of them said, no, we don't really like that brand. I said, well, okay, I'll just start to use it. I don't want to own it. I'll just start to use it. Now, here's the interesting thing, Craig. Back then, what did the E stand for? Well, electronic.
Right.
You know what it stands for now? Everybody, everywhere, every time, evolving, engaging, maybe even entertaining. So to me, that E in e-learning, it started off about being electronic, but it actually has lots more, which ultimately, once again, allows the individual to, on a personal level, have access to the knowledge and the mentorship that they need to pick up a new important life skill or competency.
Right. So, I mean, you've seen a lot, Elliott. I mean, you have literally seen, from the inception of e-learning. Since you've gotten into this space, right? I mean, and look, many people look up to you as kind of a guru in what's happening in learning. What have you seen as like the biggest evolution since you've entered the field?
Well, the top evolution has been that our attention span is more focused. That often let's translate that as shorter.
Shorter.
I think we are wanting, bluntly, always, although you can't afford to do it always, we're wanting the equivalent of being next to somebody who has the expertise we need, who we really trust, and can do that dynamically with us. And so it's led us to desire, demand, and consume more things that are more compressed, that are in shorter episodes. And, and much like streaming, I might watch 23 episodes of a show, but I watch them in sort of a marathon, way. And the other big change, though, that's happened is the idea that we don't have to learn to memory. I'm that young age of 72 and my memory's pretty good, but I'm not overly interested in memorizing things. I'm interested in familiarizing myself and then knowing where do I go when I need that knowledge or that information. I mean, you all remember when you were driving the car and you had to stop somebody and say, how do I get to Maple Avenue? And they would give you 11 things and you would forget it by the time you got there. And now we push the GPS. I think that more and more we're hitting the GPS for the details of what we need to know. And that GPS is sort of the global internet.
Yeah, right.
We're using our conversations with other people for context and for personalization and the like.
Yeah, I mean, that's brilliant, Elliot. I mean, that's actually the Einstein kind of take on memory. He says, he was famous for not knowing his street address or his phone number. And he said, well, why bother learning things I can easily look up, right?
Yeah. And I borrow from Einstein. He wore pretty much the same clothing all the time. So I have like about 47 orange shirts, I figured it saves me an awful lot of time each day. What am I going to wear? I just pick the next orange shirt on the pile. So.
Exactly. And when you add all of that decision-making time up at the end of your life, you probably got 2 more years to go.
You got it. Absolutely.
That's fantastic. Well, look, what do you see? Our viewing audience is filled with people that are in the consulting business and in the learning business and in the training business. And so I'm sure they're really interested, and as well as I am, on your take of what do you see as the big trends in organizational capability building and in learning? What's the next trend?
Well, the current trend, and then I'll give you the next one. The current trend
there you go.
Is to really focus on skills rather than credentials. Lots of organizations have made a decision that they'll hire people even though they don't have a degree in that topic or even a degree, but they'll upskill them at a competency level. And I think this is a good thing because I think it looks at us as everyday learners, that we can learn every day and get better. And there's a movement towards that. There's obviously fascination with changing technology, machine learning, artificial intelligence, putting on my metaverse goggles and the like, all of which are just enormously intriguing for me. And I call them experiments. Not because I think they're going to fail, but because they're experimental. Literally just 3 days ago, I got my new iPhone. So I moved all my pictures over to my new iPhone. And sure enough, came up a picture I had of one of the first video conference equipment I ever saw, which was at the World's Fair in 1964. Now it was really cool back then, but it didn't harvest itself until just a few years ago. So some of the technologies that are literally here and they're coming are going to evolve. And what we need to do is be both experimenters with those things,
right?
But also accept that there's a learning curve to innovation as well, and that some of the things are going to work or not work. Our phones, smartphones are less than 15 years old. And
it's amazing, right?
Yeah, my very first phone that I had 3 pictures because it wasn't connected to anything. It wasn't connected to the internet or the like. But I trust that technology in that marketplace of innovation. The technology that's good will get better. It'll probably get cheaper. It'll become more universal. And tomorrow's technology won't necessarily look like today's. And we ought to be agile and use what works and bluntly, delay or avoid that which doesn't work. Or in some cases, we're not comfortable. We're not comfortable with. I do some podcasts like you do. And every now and then I get somebody who says, I don't want to be on video. I said, no problem. We'll do an audio and I'll use some slides instead.
Sure.
I'd love to have them on video, but you want to know what's more important? Their story. And so we ought to adapt our technology and our use of our technology to the reality of the human diversity condition.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, back to story, right? Your story. I think one of the things that we share is our love for entertainment, right? You're a Broadway producer. You worked with Cyndi Lauper. You produced Kinky Boots, right? That was got Tony nominated, right?
Yep.
An amazing show. I saw it on Broadway. But I find, and when I talk with you and when I have seen you at the learning conference, you always bring an element of entertainment into every learning experience. I mean, literally every learning experience. I'm gonna point out something that I learned from you at one of the conferences, which was the passing of a microphone, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing that kills the audience, right? Faster or kills the energy in the room waiting for somebody to run across the room with a handheld microphone and put it in somebody's face and make them feel uncomfortable waiting for that moment. And you, one of your conferences had throwable microphones.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, toss it to them. Toss it to them. Absolutely.
Yeah, you tossed it to them. Number one, it was fun. It was entertaining. It was interactive. It was engaging. It kept the audience alive. But talk to us and to other people that are listening. I mean, you'll be preaching to the choir with me, but tell our audience why making learning, having, I guess my question, I guess what I'm really saying is, I want you to make the argument for me is why is some people push back against making learning fun, right? They think that, like you said, it has to be published or it's got to be in a PowerPoint, it's got to be hard and rigorous, but everything I see you do, Elliott, you bring an element of fun, you bring an element of story, and it makes for a better learning experience. Can you talk to our audience why that works?
Sure. Why do we use music at a wedding? We go to a wedding. Why is there music when you come in? Why do we sing happy birthday to people? I think the arts, and I include entertainment, humor, great storytelling, music, dance, presence. They are part of how we tap into our specialness, and what I have found, and being a Broadway producer, you end up supporting, funding, and managing shows, and many of them, some of them were horrible. One show, I went to the last dress rehearsal before it opened, and I pleaded with my executive director at the intermission, let's close it now. It was that bad. It was that bad. Now, we didn't know it. We'd seen many other pieces of it, but if you're committed to avoiding that's bad moment, then you need to think about how do we entertain, and if we think about entertainment, how do we enter the presence of an individual? And so, in Broadway, we always want to have, we call the 11 o'clock hour song before intermission, that like everybody is now, they're moving their bodies during intermission. And we just brought Kinky Boots back to New York, and I was there with Cyndi Lauper when we opened a few weeks ago, and she wanted everybody in the audience at the opening night to have a little flashlight. So for the last number, we could all get up and we could like dance with it. It lit up, and this was a successful stage presentation. I think we have to decide: are we going to settle or are we going to soar? And I don't care whether we're teaching Six Sigma safety processing or how to use an Excel spreadsheet or how to be better at diversity. I want to soar. And so I bring entertainment, I bring music, and bluntly, I do it in part because a lot of people get bored if I don't. But I want to soar with them. And it takes a little courage. And I'll tell you, once you do it for a while, it actually takes courage to not do it because you realize it works.
Oh gosh, I wish we could. I'm going to clip that sound bite. It takes courage, right, Elliott? It does, to walk out there and entertain, but while delivering meaningful information. I mean, there's a lot of data today that backs up the fact that when we learn something via story or when we're entertained by it, we retain it 72% longer than when it's read or delivered to us. So there's all kinds of data about that. Elliott, I could talk to you about story. Hey, let me just ask you one quick question, right? This could go on for an hour, but what do you think makes a good story? Like, what is the key element? Because our listeners out there, I want them to tell stories at their next job briefing, at their next staff meeting. But what do you think makes a good story?
Two things. Number one, it's got to be about two people, me and you. The story could be told by you about you, but it's got to relate to me. I've got to see myself in it. And the second thing, tell a story that can be repeatable and shared. The worst thing in the world is start a speech by going into opening jokes are us. Tell a story that people want to say, oh, I heard Craig, or I saw Elliott, or I saw Siobhan talking last night, and they told this little story, and it might only be 2 minutes of what was an all-day session, but make it repeatable. I guess in tech world we would say make it viral ready, but I don't care whether it goes tech viral. Make it a repeatable moment so it can repeat to the learner, or the learner can share it with their family, their colleagues, their customers, or others.
Right. Yeah, I tell people all the time, because I'm such a leadership junkie and, a learning junkie, and I go to lots of conferences, and I'll hear people say really brilliant things. And, I've heard you say things, and I'll look right in your eyes and I'll go, hey, look, I'm just telling you, Elliott, I'm going to make that story my own. Right? I'm going to
borrow it or steal it. Yeah, borrow it or steal it. I care neither which one you do, but use it. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I think that's like, I think if our audience could have one big takeaway, make your story shareable, make them about two people, you and the other person. Those are great tips, Elliott. But hey, look, got so much more to cover. I want to jump into. Tell me about the Learning Collaborative. This is something I know nothing about.
Well, I set something up a few years ago. All my life, I've worked with different organizations, but I set up a opportunity for about 75 organizations to collaborate with me. And we're not a traditional membership organization. We're not doing conferences or other things, but it's an opportunity for me to hear and learn with other learning leaders. And so I just got done doing a briefing with Kellogg. Yesterday I was with McKinsey, and before that I was with some colleagues from General Motors. It's a shareable opportunity for me, and I'm honored that these companies want to spend some time not only talking to each other, but drilling down to some specifics with me. So that's been part of what I do.
Right. And is this around their business,
Yeah.
or is it just around just the
It's
technology?
around learning. It's around learning and the knowledge process.
Right. Which brings me to tell us about learning producers.
Well, a learning producer is what I think a person that's in the learning field ultimately is. We've used phrases like instructional designers or course writers and the like, but theater taught me that maybe we use a bigger term, and my bigger term is learning producer. You're producing experiences. Sometimes you're actually delivering them. Sometimes you're just saying, hey, here's a book. I saw a book in an airport that I loved called Change Your Questions. So the producer in me says, hey, think about reading that book. But that the format is flexible, because I actually think that's part of what makes you a good producer, whether I'm a theater producer or I'm a music producer or I'm a learning producer. You're going to play with different formats and pick the one that works for that moment and that audience. And so I define myself as a learning producer.
Wow, that's really great. I love that terminology. There you go. You're going to get tagged with e-learning and learning producer instead of instructional designer. Shouldn't we be, though? I mean, it really does make sense. When we talk about instructional design, I mean, we have the same intent. At the end of the day, we want our learner to come out with a certain level of knowledge where they started here and they ended here. But wouldn't it be better if we approached it as, instead of designing that for them, couldn't we produce that for them to walk them into the experience?
Yep, totally.
Yeah. So Elliott, hey, I really thank you so much for your time today. I know that we didn't get to touch on everything, but hey, I got one last quick question for you, because you're such a wise sage at this point in your learning journey. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
The best piece of advice I've received is wake up every morning and think about two things. Think about something you want to learn or get better at that day. Literally, it doesn't have to be work but have something you want to learn that day. And the second piece is when you see somebody, think about how you might actually be a resource for them to learn something. Doesn't mean you have to be a teacher or a coach or something, but think about that, the process of how we are organically learners, and then how we can connect and support other people in the learning process.
That's some really good advice, Elliott. Hey, I want to thank you again for being here today. You are awesome. I've learned so much from you today. I know our viewers and our listeners have. Again, thank you for giving us an hour of your time today. You're the best.
Thank you.
And I also want to thank our producer, Jay Gates. Thank you, Jay, and the rest of our DSS Plus team who made this podcast possible. And if you found the information and the insights of this podcast helpful, well, please share it with others. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast wherever you find yours. Across the Curve was brought to you by DSS Plus, and for more information, just go to consultdss.com. That's CONSULTDSS.com. I'm Craig Sexton, and that's how the story was told to me. Now it's been told to you. Take care.
All right, here we are, and it is cleanup time, as we promised. This is the part of the show where at the very end, we kind of go back in, we reevaluate things, make sure that Craig was completely factual the entire time. So I've done some fact checking, and what do you think, Craig? How do you think you did on this episode?
Well, Jay, I know this is your favorite part of the show, right? It's where you get to review our podcast and just see how accurate I was, and if I didn't get off track too much or step outside the boundaries of the truth. So I know this is where you have your best time. So, so what do you got for me? How'd I do?
Overall, very well. I just got a couple things. One that when you said it,
I'm sure you
it jumped right out. Here, why don't we just roll the footage and you tell me what's wrong?
Okay. No, I like that. I like that. Find my own mistake.
Yeah, here we go.
Of all the things that I walked away with during one of your general sessions, something that has stayed with me so long is you did an interview with Cooper Anderson. Do you remember that?
Absolutely.
So, Craig, what do you think was wrong with that? Did you catch it?
Well, first off, let's just start with the person I'm referring to is a gentleman that has two first names, right? So
there you go.
Anderson
knew what it was.
Cooper could be a first name. So I'm guessing that you caught me on using his name out of order. What did I say? I said Cooper Anderson instead of Anderson Cooper.
Instead of Anderson Cooper. So that was just the one that jumped out to me right at the bat. The second one, I only had one more. And
look, let's just say this: as bad as I have pronounced and mispronounced people's names over the years, I will take that as a personal victory. I pronounced the first and the last name right. I just happened to get them out of order. So, Anderson, if you're out there and you're listening, please forgive me. I have met Anderson before, and so do forgive me, and I will never make that mistake again, Mr. Cooper.
Yeah, at least you didn't say like Gary Cooper or something completely off the wall. I'd be like, all right,
at least I got them both in there. I just got them in the wrong order. So to me, that's a very minor mistake, Jay.
That one's not bad.
It's not that bad.
Yeah, and you know what? Neither is the second one. Here's let's. I'm gonna roll this clip on. This is the only other thing I really caught. Let's see. Let's go over this.
Gosh, I wish we could. I'm gonna clip that sound bite. It takes courage, right, Elliott? It does, to walk out there and entertain, but while delivering meaningful information. I mean, there's a lot of data today that backs up the fact that when we learn something via story or when we're entertained by it, we retain it 72% longer than when it's read or delivered to us. Oh, now wait a second, Jay. I think I'm right on the button there. What is, you're going to fact check me on that?
Man, you were so close. And I think the part that jumped out at me was the fact that it was so precise, 72%. I was like, is it 72%? That's very precise. So I went to the study, and it wasn't exactly that precise. And again, you were very close, but it actually says retention jumps to a remarkable 65 to 70%. So again,
Oh,
2%. I mean, this isn't milk.
come on.
You know,
Hey,
it,
that's within the polling margin of error, two minus or plus 2%. And
I
where is that? But you fact checked me on what study is that? I believe that I was quoting the study from the London School of Business. Is that correct?
So this one, it doesn't say exactly what. Oh no, it is. Yeah, the London School of Business, November 7th, 2015. Yes. So this
There
was
you go.
London School of Business. But again, you 2%. You know, nobody's gonna.
2%. Come on. And what's even more amazing than that, Jay, is that that study was done in 2015. Who knows? The number could have moved 2% more since then. But I think the most amazing part is that I still remember something that was done in 2015.
So there you go. And actually, the fact, unlike Cooper Anderson, at least you didn't flip it and say 27%, because then it would have been way off, and I would have had to jump all over that. But no, 72%.
Yeah, that is
Right there.
yeah,
So.
that is true. There's some other really interesting data around that. I believe in that same study, it says that when data alone, statistics alone are delivered, you only retain approximately 7%. I believe that's the correct number
Yep.
of that information. But when you link it to an image, it jumps up to 25% that you have retention. But when you link it to a story, it jumps between 65 and 70%. I will be more accurate next time, but for
Now,
me, Jay, I mean, 2%, I just got to say that's within the margin of error.
But here's the thing: if you think about it, if it was at 7% and it ends up at 72%, that is 65% difference, which is 65 to 70%. So those numbers could have. I mean, they're all in there, but very accurate. But yeah, I still had to jump on it because if not, I'm not cleaning up right. You know,
Well, I love the
bad
fact
janitor, bad janitor. If I don't do my job.
yeah, no, I love the fact that you're doing the cleanup on me. Well, at least it lets our audience know that we're fact checking, we're giving them the real deal, we're giving them the real numbers. But wasn't Elliott a great guest? I mean,
Oh, man.
let's just talk about what a great job he did.
Yeah, he was a joy to listen to. I mean, I'm over here just kind of doing the thing, switching back and forth and editing on the fly, but just getting to listen to that, it's like it's just awesome. I mean, that's part of the good part about producing these podcasts. I get all this information just like every day. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, he's a wealth of information. He said one thing in that interview that I actually wrote down and I thought was so profound. He said, are we going to settle or are we going to soar?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think that's a great quote that we can all take with us. And that's our quote for the day, right? Are we going to settle or are we going to soar? So, Jay, I think it's a great place to wrap up today. I know that you're going to soar. And I wanted
to link it back to what you just said. That's why we do the cleanup, Craig, because we could settle with the outcome of the podcast, or we could soar and fact check it and make sure everything's accurate. And that's what we just did here, buddy.
That's what we just did. Well, hey, Jay, thanks for fact checking me. Thanks to the audience for staying tuned to the cleanup. We do this after all of our podcasts, and we look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Thank you for watching. Take care, Jay.
See you, buddy.